Claire never imagined that a single autumn evening would change the rhythm of her entire marriage. She and her husband Michael had lived together for 15 years in a quiet neighborhood in Seattle, where the streets were lined with maple trees and the air always smelled a little like rain. On the surface, their life looked peaceful, steady, stable. Friends often told them they seemed like the perfect couple, the kind who supported each other through everything and never faced any major storms. But inside the walls of their home, Claire felt something shifting. It wasn't dramatic or loud, it was subtle, like a soft ache she couldn't fully describe. It started months before that evening. Michael would pause before answering simple questions, as if he carried thoughts too heavy or too delicate to reveal. He smiled, but the smile didn't always reach his eyes. He hugged her, but sometimes his arms tightened just a second longer than usual, as if he wished he could hold on to something he feared losing. Claire noticed all these quiet signs, but she didn't push him. She believed that love wasn't about demanding explanations. It was about giving someone space until they were ready to speak. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that Michael was hiding a longing he didn't know how to express. They still shared warm dinners, still talked about their days, still watched old movies together on weekends, but something deeper seemed missing. It wasn't love. The love was there, steady as always. It was something else, an unspoken distance that neither of them understood that evening. The rain had been falling since morning, covering the city in a soft, calming sound. Claire sat at the dining table with a cup of cinnamon tea, wrapped in a cozy sweater, trying to finish a book she had picked up months ago. The warm glow of the lamp gave the room a peaceful feeling. She expected Michael to come home tired, maybe already thinking about work the next day, ready to settle into their familiar routine. But when he walked in, Claire saw something different in his expression. He wasn't sad, exactly. He wasn't stressed or upset. Instead, his face held a mix of tenderness and hesitation, like he wanted to say something important but didn't know how to begin. His eyes met hers, and she sensed a silent request for understanding, for patience, maybe even for courage. He set down his keys quietly, removed his jacket, and stood there for a moment without speaking. Claire felt a small tug of worry. She placed her book aside and looked at him directly. "Michael," she said softly, "are you okay?" He nodded, but it wasn't the kind of nod that said yes. It was the kind that said, "I'm trying to be." Claire rose from her chair and walked toward him. She didn't touch him right away. She simply stood close enough for him to know she was there, steady and open, ready for whatever he needed to share. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was meaningful. Claire could feel that something important was hovering right at the edge of his thoughts. She waited, letting him gather himself. She had always known that Michael carried emotions deeply, and when something mattered to him, he wanted to say it right. He looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen in a long time, gentle, vulnerable, almost apologetic. It reminded her of a younger version of him, the one she had met in college, who used to confess his fears with raw honesty. Seeing that expression again made her heart tighten. Finally, Michael spoke, but only in fragments at first. "Claire, I've been thinking about something for a long time." His voice was calm but quiet, as if he was worried the sentence itself might cause a shift they couldn't reverse. Claire felt a ripple of anticipation. She didn't interrupt. She knew he needed to feel heard. "I haven't said anything because I didn't want you to misunderstand," he continued, running a hand through his hair the way he always did when he was nervous. "But it's been on my mind for months." Claire's breath caught slightly. This wasn't about work. It wasn't about health. It had the weight of something personal, something emotional. She stepped closer and finally placed her hand on his arm, giving him silent reassurance. "Michael," she whispered, "you can tell me anything." Her words softened him. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if letting them sink in. When he opened them again, she saw gratitude there, warm, deep, and familiar. But he still didn't say the wish. Not yet. Instead, he moved to sit on the edge of the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Claire followed, sitting beside him. She could feel the tension in the room, but it wasn't negative. It was the tension that comes when someone is about to open their heart. He took a slow breath. Claire watched his fingers tremble just slightly. She wanted to tell him that whatever he carried, they could face it together, but she knew he needed to say it on his own. "Claire," he began again, his voice steadier this time. "There's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time. Something I've been too afraid to bring up." Her pulse quickened not in fear, but in anticipation. She could feel the moment unfolding. It's delicate and significant. Michael finally looked her in the eye, and in that moment, Claire understood that whatever he was about to say came from love, not from doubt. His gaze held affection, longing, and a deep desire to be understood. "I have a wish," he said quietly, "one I've never said out loud." The room felt still. Even the sound of rain outside seemed to fade for a second. Claire felt her heart pause. A wish. What kind of wish carried this much weight? Why had he kept it inside for so long? But before she could ask, he swallowed, trying to find the right words. Claire waited, feeling the moment stretching like a thin line between them, fragile, hopeful, and full of meaning. She didn't know if this wish would surprise her, scare her, or draw them closer. All she knew was that something important was coming, something that would change everything softly, quietly, but deeply. And Michael, after years of silence, was finally ready to speak. Michael sat beside Claire with his hands folded tightly, as if holding back the fear of saying the wrong thing. For a moment, he stared at the floor, searching for courage in the quiet space between them. Claire watched him closely, her heart steady but full of anticipation. She could sense that whatever he was about to share came from a deep place inside him, something he had carried alone for far too long. She didn't rush him. She simply waited, letting the moment settle, giving him room to breathe. Finally, Michael lifted his head and met her eyes. There was no anger, no disappointment, no accusation in his expression. Only hope. And something softer, almost like sadness, that had been waiting to be understood. Claire felt her chest tighten with emotion. She reached for his hand gently, encouraging him without words. He took a slow, thoughtful breath. "Claire," he began, speaking carefully, "I love our life. I love you. That has never changed." His voice was steady but fragile, like he was handling something delicate. But somewhere along the way, something in us became quiet. Claire felt the words land softly in her heart. She knew what he meant. Over the years, work schedules, responsibilities, bills, and daily routines had created a steady rhythm, but not always a lively one. They cared for each other deeply, but they rarely paused to feel the way they used to. Still, hearing him say it made everything inside her shift. Michael continued, his voice gaining strength. "I've felt something missing. Not love, not connection, just moments." He paused, letting the thought shape itself. Moments where we feel alive together. Moments where we don't just live side by side, but really share something that reminds us why we chose each other. Claire's fingers tightened around his, not out of fear, but out of recognition. She knew exactly what he meant. She had felt it too. The long days filled with tasks instead of memories. The evenings where exhaustion muted their conversations. The quiet comfort that sometimes turned into quiet distance. Michael lowered his gaze again, as if embarrassed. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to think I was unhappy with you. I miss us." His honesty hit Claire with a wave of emotion. Not because she felt blamed, but because she realized how deeply he had loved her all these years. He wasn't asking for change out of frustration. He was asking out of devotion. She gently touched his shoulder, encouraging him to keep going. He looked up again, eyes reflecting a soft light. "I have a wish," he said, repeating the words he once hesitated to say. Not a dramatic one. Not something big or strange, just something simple. He paused, then spoke clearly. "I want to fall in love with you again. Not because we lost anything, but because I want to feel what we used to feel, the excitement, the closeness, the spark that made every day feel special." Claire's breath caught. The simplicity of his wish made it powerful. He wasn't asking for a different life. He was asking for a deeper connection within the life they already shared. He wanted their love not just to exist, but to live. He continued, words tumbling out now that he had finally opened the door. I want us to make memories again. I want to take small trips, try new things, sit outside in the evenings, and talk until we're tired of talking. I want to feel you beside me, not just as my wife, but as the person who still makes my world brighter. Claire felt tears forming not from sadness, but from warmth. She had longed for the same things, but never found a way to say them. Life had a way of burying desires under to-do lists, deadlines, and routines. Hearing Michael speak his truth made all the buried feelings rise back to the surface. Before she could speak, he added quietly, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to sound ungrateful. We've built a life together, a good one. But I think we stopped noticing each other in the way that made us happy, and I miss that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside grew softer, turning into a gentle patter on the windows. The room felt warmer, heavier with emotion, but also lighter. As if a weight had finally been lifted, Claire wiped her eyes and took his hands fully in hers. Her voice was soft but certain. Michael, I've missed that too. She saw relief flash across his face. She squeezed his hands again. You're not wrong for wanting more moments together. You're not wrong for wanting us to feel close again. I've wanted that too, but I didn't know how to bring it up. He exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over his features. Claire could see that he had expected fear, rejection, or misunderstanding. Instead, he was met with understanding. She leaned closer, her voice steady and full of emotion. If your wish is to feel alive together again, then yes. Yes to all of it. I want the same. Ka didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, surprised by how easy she made it. After months of carrying his silent wish, he finally saw that she wasn't far from him. She had been near him the whole time, quietly longing for the same thing. Claire rested her head on his shoulder. We're still us, she whispered. We're just buried under years of responsibilities, but we can find our way back. Michael placed his hand gently on hers. I don't want to go back, he said softly. I want us to move forward together. In that moment, something shifted. Not a loud shift. Not dramatic, but meaningful. They were no longer two people hiding their fears behind tired smiles. They were two hearts speaking honestly again. Claire lifted her head and studied him. The man she had loved through every season of their shared life. He looked older than the boy she first met, but wiser, steadier, and just as full of love. The fact that he still wished for more with her touched her more deeply than she expected. She whispered the words that finally sealed the moment. Then let's do it. Let's start again. Michael's eyes softened. The tension in his shoulders faded. For the first time in months, maybe years, he allowed himself to feel hopeful. They sat together in silence. Not the distant kind, but the peaceful kind. The kind that follows confession, truth, and mutual understanding. A silence that felt like a new beginning. Neither of them knew exactly what the next steps would be. But they knew one thing clearly. They wanted to find each other again. And Claire's yes was the first step toward everything they were about to rediscover. The following week arrived faster than Claire expected. After their long, heartfelt talk, she and Michael didn't want to wait months before doing something meaningful. They agreed to take a short trip, nothing luxurious, nothing complicated, just a quiet weekend somewhere peaceful. A place where life slowed down enough for them to hear themselves again. Claire suggested returning to the small lakeside town in British Columbia, a place they visited in their 20s. It had been one of their happiest trips. A memory they often talked about but never repeated. Michael liked the idea instantly. Something about going back to a place tied to their early love felt symbolic. Almost like opening an old book and discovering that the pages still held the same warmth. So they packed light 2 bags. Some warm clothes, and a few snacks for the road. The morning they left Seattle, the sky was clear and the air felt fresh, as if even the weather approved of their quiet journey. The drive was smooth, and they spent most of it talking about simple things, songs they used to love. old memories from college, silly stories from their early days of dating. The conversation wasn't forced. It flowed easily, like a river that had finally found its path again. Claire felt something loosen inside her, something that had been tight for years. When they crossed the border into Canada, the mountains grew taller and the roads curved around forests that seemed endless. Michael reached for her hand as he drove, and she let her fingers rest in his. It was a small gesture, but it felt like opening a window in a room that had been closed for too long by the time they reached the lakeside town. The sun was already leaning low in the sky. The cabin they rented was simple wooden walls, a small fireplace, and a window that looked straight out to the calm water. Claire stepped inside and felt a strange mix of nostalgia and hope. She remembered the first time they stayed there, how the two of them had laughed all night, how everything back then had felt easy and new. Now the cabin felt different, but in a good way, like a place waiting for them to create new memories. Michael set down the bags and stretched, looking around with a soft smile. "Feels like home," he said. Claire nodded. "It does." It didn't waste time. The moment they settled in, they went for a short walk near the lake. The water was still, reflecting the sky like a huge mirror. Pine trees surrounded the shoreline, tall and steady. Claire breathed in the cold air, feeling it rush into her lungs like a reminder that life still had space for beauty. Michael walked beside her quietly, not out of discomfort, but out of contentment. After a few minutes, he reached over and wrapped an arm around her waist. She leaned into him, absorbing the warmth of his body through her jacket. When they returned to the cabin, they cooked a simple meal together, nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables. But the act of cooking side by side brought back an old rhythm. Their movements synced naturally. They laughed when Michael accidentally dropped a spoon. Claire felt her heart swell at the sound of their shared joy. Later that night, they sat by the fireplace with blankets around their shoulders. The flames crackled softly and a warm glow filled the room. It reminded Claire of their early years, when life was busy but somehow lighter, when they had endless conversations about their future. She looked at Michael and realized she still saw the same man she had fallen in love, with the same gentle eyes, the same thoughtful smile, the same heart that never stopped caring. Michael broke the quiet first. "I forgot how good it feels to just sit with you like this," he said. Claire nodded. "I forgot too." He turned to face her fully. "I don't want us to slide back into routine when we go home. I want to hold on to this feeling." Claire heard the sincerity in his voice, and it touched her deeply. She placed her hand over his. "So do I. We can keep this alive. We just have to choose it." The next day was filled with small adventures. They took a hiking trail through the forest, speaking about dreams they still held deep and ones they hadn't shared in years. Claire talked about wanting to paint again. Michael admitted he always wanted to learn photography but never made the time. They walked along the lake afterward, skipping stones like two teenagers enjoying a lazy afternoon. Claire laughed when her stones sank immediately. And Michael pretended to teach her technique even though his own stones barely traveled farther. The simple joy of the moment made everything else fade into the background. As the sun began to set, the sky turned shades of orange and rose, reflecting beautifully on the water. Claire stood still, watching the colors stretch across the lake, feeling peaceful in a way she hadn't felt in years. Michael walked up beside her and spoke quietly, as if sharing a secret with the wind. "Claire, I didn't wish for adventure. I didn't wish to escape anything. I wished for us." She turned to look at him, and the expression on his face was full of gentle conviction. His wish wasn't about doing something exciting, it was about returning to something meaningful, something real. Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest. "We're here," she said softly. "We found our way back." But as she looked at Michael, a new thought formed quietly inside her. It wasn't fear exactly. It was a fragile question. What happens after this? When we go home? Will this feeling fade again? She didn't say it out loud. She kept the thought tucked inside, not wanting to disturb the peace of the moment. But it lingered in her heart, a soft uncertainty wrapped inside all the hope they had just created. That night, As they returned to the cabin and prepared for bed, Claire held on to Michael a little longer than usual, hoping that the closeness they had rebuilt wouldn't disappear once the trip ended. She fell asleep with her head on his chest, listening to the calm rhythm of his breathing, wondering if this journey was just the beginning of something new or a fragile moment she needed to protect. When dawn arrived on their last morning at the lake, Claire woke earlier than usual. The cabin was still and Michael was asleep beside her, breathing softly, unaware of the thoughts moving quietly inside her. The sky outside the window was a soft gray blue, the kind that appears only moments before sunrise. She slipped out of bed gently, not wanting to wake him, and stepped outside into the cold morning air. The lake looked calm, untouched, as if waiting for the day to begin. A thin layer of mist floated above the water, giving the whole scene a peaceful, almost magical feeling. Claire wrapped her arms around herself and watched the horizon brighten. She wanted to enjoy the quiet, but her mind kept pulling her back to the questions she had tried to push away. The night before, she wondered what would happen once they went home. Would they fall back into routines and responsibilities? Would the spark they rediscovered fade slowly, the way it had before? She didn't want their trip to become just another memory, something beautiful but temporary. She wanted something lasting, something steady, something that could survive the real world. Claire breathed out slowly, feeling a mix of hope and fear. She didn't doubt their love. She doubted life's ability to stay gentle. She doubted time. She doubted the way everyday responsibilities could quietly pile up and cover the things that mattered most. While she stood there thinking, she heard the soft sound of the cabin door opening behind her. She turned and saw Michael walking toward her, wrapped in a blanket. His hair was messy and his eyes were still half asleep. But the moment he saw her, he gave her a gentle smile. "You're up early," he said softly. She nodded. "Couldn't sleep?" Michael stepped closer and placed the blanket around her shoulders. "Cold morning," he said, but his eyes searched hers, sensing there was more. Claire looked back at the lake, unable to hide the worry on her face. Michael moved beside her, his presence warm and grounding. "Claire," he said quietly, "what's on your mind?" She hesitated. She didn't want to ruin the peaceful moment, but she also didn't want to carry her doubts home with her. So she let the truth come out slowly. "Honestly, I'm scared," she admitted. "Not scared of you? Not scared of us. I'm scared that when we go back home, everything will go back to the way it was. Busy days, tired nights, no time for each other. And this," she gestured to the lake, "the quiet, the closeness, this will fade." Michael listened without interrupting. He didn't try to argue or dismiss her feelings. He simply stood there, taking in every word with a seriousness that made Claire's eyes sting with emotion. When she finished, he reached for her hand. "Claire," he said gently, "we're not trying to return to who we were years ago. We're not trying to recreate the past. That's not my wish. My wish is for us to move forward with intention, with awareness, with choice." She looked down at their hands and felt the truth of his words settle inside her. Michael squeezed her fingers lightly. "Life will always be busy. We can't stop that. But we can choose what we hold on to. We can choose each other even when things get hard. This trip isn't the solution. It's the beginning." Claire felt her breath lighten. She lifted her head and met his eyes. He wasn't offering promises he couldn't keep. He wasn't claiming life would suddenly become perfect. He was offering something better: commitment, effort, partnership. Michael stepped closer, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "I don't want this moment to end either," he said. "But the real work happens when we go home, and I'm ready for that. I want to show you that I meant every word I said. I want you to feel chosen every day." His voice held a kind of quiet truth that soothed her fear. She realized that love wasn't only found in peaceful getaways or beautiful sunsets. It was built in the ordinary mornings, the long work days, the evenings when exhaustion pulled them in different directions. Love lived in the choices they made daily to stay close. Even when life became difficult, Claire leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her with a warmth that melted her doubts. The sun began to rise fully, spilling golden light across the lake and painting everything in soft, gentle colors. For a long moment, they stood in silence. But it wasn't the silence of distance, it was the silence of understanding. The kind that comes when two hearts finally find their rhythm again. Eventually, Michael whispered, "We're going to be okay, Claire. Not because the world will make it easy, but because we will make the effort." His words settled into her heart like a promise she didn't know she needed. She closed her eyes, letting the morning light touch her face. Letting the warmth of his embrace remind her that love, when nurtured, never disappears. It simply waits for two people to notice it again. After a while, they went back inside and began packing their things. The cabin felt different now, not like a place they were leaving behind, but like a place that had returned a missing part of them. Claire folded clothes, Michael zipped bags, both moving with quiet smiles, both knowing that something inside them had changed. On the drive back home, they talked again, not heavy conversations, not emotional confessions, but simple plans. They talked about cooking together more often, taking evening walks, spending time without screens, visiting new places, even if just for a day. Small things, manageable things, real things. Each plan felt like a small promise, a commitment to not let routine swallow their connection again. When they finally reached Seattle, the city felt familiar, but Claire noticed something new in the familiar. Her home, her life, her marriage, they all felt fuller, warmer, more alive. As they unpacked, she watched Michael place their bags in the corner and look at her with the same gentle expression he had at the lake. He walked up to her, brushing a loose hair away from her face. "We're not starting over," he said softly. "We're continuing stronger." Claire smiled, feeling her heart settle into a peaceful certainty. She leaned into him, grateful for the wish he had finally shared. Grateful she had said yes. Grateful that they had rediscovered each other, not through grand gestures, but through honesty, time, and courage. Their life didn't look different from the outside. The house was the same. The city was the same. Their routines were waiting. But something inside them, something important, had changed. And as Claire held Michael close, she understood the truth. Love doesn't disappear with time. It grows deeper when two people choose it again. And they had chosen each other fully, quietly, and forever.